Good morning all. Can I say Happy New Year in anticipation? I'm Richard, one of the elders here. Jamie and Joe are having a well-earned rest after Christmas, and you've got me instead. Can I just say though, a huge thank you to everybody who worked so hard to make the Christmas programme such a wonderful time. As people do things behind the scenes, people end up inside camels. If you didn't see it, you'll have to explore that yourself. But it was a lovely Christmas, and we had a really good times together. This morning, just in case you thought you were safe to get away from puns, you're not. Incoming. That's what we're looking at this morning, incoming. It's a military term. When you're a soldier being fired at, the enemy fire is incoming, and it's stuff that takes you by surprise, is dangerous, and generally makes you take shelter. It's the period after the baby's been born. And in our Bibles, we could easily get the impression that the whole of the Christmas story took place in about a week. Yeah, it actually spreads out rather more than that. And this morning we're going to be looking at what Matthew tells us about the wise men and the villain of the piece. If Christmas was a pantomime, we'd all be booing and hissing Herod. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Thank you. If you think that was bad, you should have heard me 2 days ago. Right, I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 2. You'd like to follow with me? After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least amongst the rulers of Judah. Out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people, Israel." Then I'm going to leave the passage there. In essence, what happens is this. Herod says, "Go and find the baby, come back, tell me where he is, and I'll go and worship him." At which point, Pinocchio took a couple of early appearances, and the nose of King Herod began to get longer. His idea of worship being somewhat different to ours. I'm going to try and be brief this morning, you'll be pleased to know. Partly because I'm not sure whether my voice will last, and partly I respect your patience after Christmas, turkey, pudding, and various other things. It might be tempting for you to begin to doze off. Okay, I'm going to look at the two main groups of characters here. There's wise men, and there's Herod and the authorities. And I just want to hold the wise men up to us as an example of how we should approach Christ, how we should approach Christmas, how we should approach the investigation of this wonderful story. As Jamie mentioned, if you were here the other week, they're wise men from the east, probably some form of astrologer come seer. We don't know very much about them. And they're quite unlikely as candidates to come and greet Jesus. Why would these people come? They're not Jewish, but they've seen a sign, they've seen a star in the sky, They're asking questions. And they come with open hearts. And over Christmas, we heard of angels and shepherds and Mary and Joseph, the debate about where Jesus was born. So many things, facts, opinions, descriptions. And I hope for most of us we've come to the story and it's a bit like meeting an old friend and we reminisce, we catch up. But for some of us maybe over Christmas it's been a new story, or there's been parts of it we've never really taken on board before. The wise men have these open hearts. Let's go and find out what this sign means. Let's go and discover for ourselves what is happening in the world. They use their experience in life. They probably had some authority or influence in their home community, but they leave and take quite a lengthy pilgrimage through the desert, across the hills, following a star. Some of you may have seen the programme this week, trying to track down what was it that they saw, the Star of Bethlehem. And scientists have suggested all sorts of different things, and theologians have argued about it for years. But what we know is this: they saw this thing, this star, that was so bright, so unusual, so overpowering in the night sky, that they could not ignore it. And they decided, we will find out. And they had an understanding that something spectacularly important was happening in history, which is why they packed the gifts that would later be offered to Jesus, gifts for a king. They put their money where their mouth is. They put their backside where the camel is. Off they go to discover the truth. And they show an admirable openness, a willingness to believe that this is important, and not only believe about it, but do something with it. We are going to find this baby. Now, Christmas is an illustration for us of an eternal truth. Power corrupts. If you've ever had any kind of leadership role, any kind of influence, you know there are times where decisions have to be made, and you weigh everything up and you try and do what's right and fair, but it's so easy to take a shortcut, or sometimes to make your choices and stack up all the odds and think, well, that's not right, but it will be better if we do this. And that's nice people, shall we say, good leaders. They find themselves sometimes making hard choices. Well, what happens if power gets into the heart of somebody who does not generally make good choices? The screen showing there that wonderful thing from Christmas. I'm not sure if you want to read the words on above the picture, but it says, 1,000 times in history, a baby has become a king. But only once in history did a king become a baby. That's a big difference, isn't it? A king who becomes a baby. That's a different kind of power. Jesus, who gives up his authority, his place beside the Father, and goes through that astonishing and somewhat humiliating experience of becoming a human being, combining God and man in one. I do not remember being born. My mum remembered me being born. I was just over 8 pounds. And when her eyes uncrossed, I arrived just in time for breakfast, which probably set the pattern for my life. But I remember nothing of the experience. Nothing at all. Because our brains don't remember stuff like this. You know, I remember a big red bus I was given for my 3rd birthday. It was a friction motor, rum, rum, whee, had it for years. I don't remember much before that. Jesus, part of the eternal Godhead, lays all that to one side and spends the first few days of his life in a trough filled with hay. And we complain about the NHS, eh? Good grief. But this is power being exercised through love. Power through love. However, as any writer of books or plays or films will tell you, every story has conflict. If you don't have a conflict, you probably don't have a story. You know, the first books we reread when we were little, Janet and John. Yeah? Do you remember the high tension, big fight where they all piled in and mugged the governess? No, because they weren't there. Janet and John got up. Janet sat in a chair. John played with the dog. Now, that sort of story, when you're just beginning to learn, it's rather nice, isn't it? Read it again, mummy. But when you're 40, and mum says, I'm going to read you a story for your birthday, dear. Janet, screams of horror. Because we expect conflict, and conflict is something that brings other things to the surface. Chemical reactions can be quite violent, but they can produce pure gold, for example, or the oxygen that we breathe. There is a certain amount of conflict that seems pretty much inevitable. This is where the Christmas story finds its conflict. I thought I'd try and illustrate it this morning. And I'm not being political here, honest. There are other world leaders available. Causes of hatred in the Christmas story, just so we get to know what the characters are. Donald J. Herod and Caesar v. Putin. Right, now, I'm just using those as an example of the kind of power figures. These are top dogs. These are people who have power and are not afraid to use it. We don't really come up against the Caesar figure in the Christmas story very much, just the censors that had to be taken. But Herod comes to the fore in this part of the story. And he was known as Herod the Great. Isn't it funny how sometimes leaders take really inappropriate names for themselves? Herod the Great. A conniving, lying, power-hungry, nasty-minded, cruel, vindictive, thoroughly pleasant chap. And the wise men, in their wisdom, they go and they say to Donald J. Herod, where is this baby who has been born, the king for Israel? And Herod goes, you are what? I don't want a king. That would take my place. None of this stuff. Call the experts, call the theologians, call the scholars, call the Daily Mail. No, don't call the Daily Mail. Where is this baby to be born? And they look at their Old Testaments, or what they called the Bible, and they said, in Bethlehem, the baby will be born. This is where Herod gets crafty and nasty. Go and find him. Come back to me. Tell me where I can find this baby, and I'll go and pay honor to him. Yes. Indiscriminate. Notice that other pun. Because Herod chooses the most brutal solution. If this child has been born, the best way I could get rid of him is to kill all male children born in that period. And just to make sure, we'll go a couple of years either way. Unthinkable, isn't it? Would anybody here have suggested that as a solution to there not being enough school places in Bognor Regis for your child? Let's kill lots of them and make some room. A real normal human being doesn't think like that, do they? It's not just me, is it? I just find this bloke, awful, beyond words. Come and tell me so I can go and sort him out. Now, there are options here. What's the best option? The one the wise men are using, humility. There is a new king being born. We will go and worship the king. And we will watch and see what happens. And maybe this is going to change the world. They were right. Herod chose the other option, violence. I think it was Isaac Asimov, the writer, who said once, violence is the last resort of the incompetent. If you've tried everything else, or if you don't want to try anything else, solve the problem with force. This is the Christmas story. You didn't come here this morning to be told about child murder, did you? About politics that stink? You came here to be cheered up and told how wonderful it is that Jesus has been born. Yeah, amen to that. It is absolutely wonderful and glorious. But if we don't understand the backstory, we lose something of the importance, something of the majesty of the Christmas story itself. Now, if we were writing it as a fairy story, it'd be wonderful, wouldn't it? And the baby was born, he grew up in the palace, and when he was old enough, he became king, and everybody lived happily ever after. Has your life been like that? Anybody? Any takers? Nobody ever had anything bad? Of course not, because we understand life. We've experienced life. We go through things that, well, sometimes we hardly know how to deal with them. And the Christmas story, the story of the birth of Jesus, is God dealing with that reality. We began this morning, Daphne and I, with that little skit on prayer. Because prayer is a fine example of let's keep it real. Some of you may have heard it before. Some of you it might be new to. But it was a good examination of what we need to be doing when we're talking and when we're listening. Our words need to be matched by our actions. Our prayers, if they're real, will change us. I quite like the kind of prayers where my prayers change somebody else. Pray their free will away. Think about that one for a minute. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could organise the world so that everybody did it properly? And me, being the expert on doing things properly, is going to tell you all exactly how you should live. And those of you who are really horrified are leaving now. The rest of you will be out the door in 2 minutes. No. We need something that is real, if it's to count for something in our lives now. When Jesus came as a baby and arrived in that less than majestic establishment This is God getting down and dirty. I read a little skit once about the angels who were preparing for Bethlehem, and one of them invented the vacuum cleaner a few centuries early so they could, tidy the place up a bit. And they got disinfectant to swab down where the animals had been. And then Gabriel said, "Gentlemen, stop this. This time it's for real. It's for real. God in the world, in the mess and the muck, in the love and the joy and the sadness and the tears, God with us." The wise men, if we were to read further in Matthew, they proved they were wise because after they'd left Herod, an angel appeared to them and said, "By the way, don't go back to Herod. Go a different way home." And that probably actually meant they went a long, long way out of their route. A long extra journey, more expense, more time. But they were wise enough to pay attention. When we're invited into the Christmas story, we are faced with the greatest gift that's ever been given. Jesus, God's love embodied. And we like the stuff, don't we? The Christmas tree bit there. Joy, love, peace, believe, Christmas, woo, whippy. And I love Christmas as much as anybody and more than many. But the downside of it and the relevance of Christmas is that Joseph and Mary have to take Jesus away for safety. They take him to Egypt as a refugee. And while they're gone, Herod's soldiers arrive. They slaughter the innocents. I thought about being very liturgical today. No, it's not a disease, honest. It's the Feast of the Innocents today in the church calendars. Did you know that? Did anybody know that? I only found out last night. It's marked in the liturgical calendar as the day to remember the actions of Herod and the death of the innocent, the attempt to get rid of Jesus early, before he grows up, and the absolute failure of it, but the incredible horror, the tears of those families. It's a story with conflict because it's a real world. And a real God coming into a real world has to face the world as it is. You can't invent the vacuum cleaner too early. It's called cheating. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could say, I don't like, well, let's pick on him because he's already been mentioned. I don't like what Mr. Putin is doing. I shall say, Lord, please remove him. Should we do that together? Anybody want to join in? Dear God, please get rid of Putin. I wonder what would happen. But God doesn't usually work quite like that. The world goes on its rocky way, and we have to find our way through it. And Jesus, who is God with us, accompanies us on the journey. The rough as well as the smooth, the tragic as well as the joy. And in a generation where we're facing a big question, what do we do with refugees, asylum seekers? And you might think, what's he doing getting into politics? It's not politics, it's humanity. These are real people. Do you remember that photograph? I think it was probably 3 or 4 years ago now. That poor little 3-year-old boy who bobbed up, drowned on the foreshore. His poor little scrap, trying to cross the channel and drowned. And at the time there was a bit of shock and horror, and people went, "Oh dear, how terrible, how dreadful." And it was. Not so many people saying how dreadful at the moment. Can I ask us seriously, and I'm not supporting any political party or any political leader, I'm asking you to make your own conscious-based decisions based on the facts that you can see and the story that's in the scriptures. What attitude should we have to those who are really struggling? It'd be very easy to bash certain politicians. It's neither the time nor the place to do that. If you want to agree with me or have a fight with me afterwards, there's mince pies out there, we can throw them at each other if you like. But that's not the point. The point is, what does God say when we find ourselves in a position to help or hinder? What do we do when the story gets real and it's a person, not a statistic, not a cartoon figure? What do we do? And we look back and say, and Jesus became a refugee. That's quite frightening, really, isn't it? Does it make it real? Does it bring Christmas up to date? I love Christmas, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be negative and nasty. But the beauty of Christmas is that it shines in the darkness of a world that needs light. It's a love that is big enough and strong enough to embrace the grotty stuff as well as the lovely things. It's a time at Christmas to be reminded we are called to be like Christ, with his attitudes and his actions and his words. And if we don't do it as the people of God, why should anybody else bother? You don't have to answer that question. But if you don't, you might just find yourself waking up in the small hours one morning and thinking, oh, how does my faith in Jesus relate to whatever the current situation is in the headlines? It's all about Jesus, isn't it, Christmas? You can actually nod at that point. You're not committing yourself to anything other than simple agreement. It's all about Jesus, isn't it? And Jesus is all about God's love for the whole world and everything in it. And we've been handed the baton. You think of it as a relay race. Jesus grew up and called disciples and he sent them out. And Jesus died on a cross and was raised from the dead, went back to glory, and he sent out the early church, and they sent out people, and they got all around the world, and they handed the truth on to the next generation. I wish I had a baton I could hand to us this morning, because it's in our grasp. This is the leg we've got to run, because it's for real. Christmas is for real, not just for tinsel, not just for turkey. And you may be glad about that, because we're on to the next day of leftovers and we're starting to look like a turkey. But it's about more than that. And it's about a love that is big enough and strong enough to meet the need of this world. I'm going to hand over to Kim, and perhaps the musicians. If you'd like to come and do some conjuring tricks. Thank you.
Yeah, Okay, I think the thing that something else might have struck you in everything that Richard said, but I think for me the thing that struck me the most was when right at the beginning, actually. So, yeah, no, I'm joking, but it was about the wise men, and you said 4 things about them: open hearts, using life experience, willing to act positively, and belief and obedience. And I think out of those 4 things, the 2 would be the first and the last. Do we have open hearts? Is my heart open to what the Lord has? Is my heart open? And then, if it is open, what do I do about it? Do I have the obedience to follow it through? And I've just got a prayer here that I just want to read out to you. And I'm going to read it in the form of me. And if you feel that it applies to you, then at the end, please do say amen. Otherwise, I'll be the only one saying amen. I don't think I will. And I picked this up from Lectio 365 this morning, which just fits in really well. Loving Father, in these liminal days between Christmas and New Year, I open my ears with particular attentiveness to your still small voice. Prepare my heart, I pray, for whatever the coming year may bring. I choose to rejoice in the blessings of 2025, joining with the ancient praise of all God's people in the words of Psalm 75. I recall all you have done, O Lord. I remember your wonderful deeds. They are constantly in my thoughts. I cannot stop thinking about your mighty works, O God. Your ways are holy. Amen. Amen. And so as we go forward, we open our ears, we open our hearts, and we want to be obedient to you, O Lord. Amen.